I think early on I already knew that I wanted to go into the creative side of the art world, just because that's kind of what my passion was growing up, really putting artists and ideas together and creating a new dialogue. And I'm much more pulled towards that force rather than the commodity and market side of the art world. I think a curator is someone who guides the artists, at the same time brings them together to create something new, and also understand the way in which different artists, different movements, and different ideas also work together. So I think the curator almost plays this overpowering, well, kind of, what's the word for it? Like, he accompanies them through their work and also helps them, should we say, figure out the way in which that's going to relate to the other artists. My main goal is to create an experience for people. So a lot of my work is interactive, performance-based, and has a lot of live participatory aspects to it. And I think that's one of the most important things in curating a show, is really to instigate a reaction within people. And that's also lost in a lot of the art world today, because a lot of shows that you end up going to, you kind of walk in, you just look at a few artworks on a wall, you don't really understand what it's about, and then you leave. So that's kind of what I always try to avoid. I try to always make it unique, to push a boundary by either working with an abstract layout or combining different mediums that haven't been combined before, but really, again, trying to raise people to think about a specific thing or concept or theme. I mean, I think it's unavoidable to have a social dialogue and critique when you are doing curatorial work, because in the end, you're kind of trying to build a bridge between the audience and the artwork. So a lot of that time, that brings to life a lot of social and political, should we say, thoughts or waves that are current or that are historical. And of course, the way in which we incorporate history, it's very hard not to have that socio-political relationship to the work. I mean, I think visual experience is the most basic aspect that has to be prevalent with my work. That's definitely the first connection that people have, and that I try to make them have when they walk in to an exhibition, is to immediately feel and have that reaction, have that sensory kind of click. But then after that, I also want to bring in a deeper understanding where I force people to question a specific idea, a specific historical time, and kind of recontextualize that into their own space. And I think that's important. There needs to be two different dimensions to it, because some people, they like art simply for the aesthetic value, which is of course very important because you need to have a connection to it. But then there also needs to be a deeper kind of sphere in which people can actually relate to one another. I mean, I think the biggest challenge in that sphere is balance, is to create a balance both with the artist that you're working with, but also with the curatorial idea that you're coming across. I mean, I think that comes into play in my work because I like working in very abstract and unconventional spaces and locations. So a lot of the time, that it can be intimidating then for artists to not know exactly the way in which their art is going to be perceived. But I also think that's something to do with the trust that you have between artists and a curator, where trust is really the first basic, should I say, bridge that I build with an artist, where I try to first understand what they want, and then I try to incorporate what they want into my vision. No, I actually prefer group shows to one-man shows. just because I like working with different themes, and I'm a very mixed medium curator, so I like mixing loads of different types of art forms, especially kind of bringing into dialogue something like photography and painting and sculpture at the same time as performance. But no, I think it's all kind of comes together quite importantly under one umbrella. I prefer large spaces just because there's more, I don't know, there's something very overpowering when you walk into a very big space, which is kind of the catch-22, because that can also be what deconstructs the work, because at times you can walk into a space and the biggest challenge is that you don't want the work to be lost within a space. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is trying to find a way that people can connect with it but not feel dwarfed by, you know, the environment that they're in. But I think if you think about the journey that people have throughout the space and you kind of curate the way in which people are going to walk through the space, as long as you have those guidelines, it should be okay. My most memorable show is probably a performance collaboration I did with Gertrude, which is a company that organizes evening salons here in New York, where I worked with a composer from the Lincoln Center who made 5 short opera pieces based on Freud's interpretation of the dreams. And I had a harpist from the Philharmonic, a dancer from the New York City Ballet, and then an abstract live painter, and I had them all kind of navigate in the space at the same time, but it was all done with a lighting technician behind screens. So it created this very dreamlike, eerie experience where I attempted to replicate a dream essentially, and the way in which it feels so close, but then there's also this distance between the viewer and the screen. But it came out really beautifully, and it was a collaboration that was, you know, it was the first time each individual was collaborating in this kind of space and with these different types of mediums. So it was a really interesting dialogue, and that was definitely my favorite one. I think photography is underrated. I've worked with a lot of photographers, and I've done quite a few photography exhibitions, but it's still a medium that is, of course, less, should I say, glorified than the other more standardized mediums in the art world. But now, especially with technology and the way in which we're moving forward, there are so many different angles, techniques, types of cameras, types of lenses, the speed, the complexity of the form. There's so many different levels to it now that photography is really taking a whole new direction, and I think it's only going to continue to grow and hopefully get the respect that it deserves. I would save this small painting that was painted in 1907 by Kandinsky. It was one of his early improvisation pieces, and it's called Der Sturm, which means the storm, and it's just this beautiful mess of color and movement and energy. And I've only ever seen it once at Georges Pompidou at the Kandinsky retrospective a few years ago, but I've literally been obsessed with it since then, so I definitely take that one. I would probably be Hans Ulrich Obrist, just because I think he pushes the world of curatorial boundaries to another dimension, and also just all of his written work and his collaborations with artists and interviewing artists and working in abstract spaces is beyond what anyone else has achieved in the art world. Definitely James Turrell. I think that would be the most chilled and calm experience in the world ever.